Hello, and welcome to Basic Resume Development. A couple of resources before we get started. If you don't have any kind of draft or any template that you're working from, we have a variety of templates that you can access by following the steps listed on the PowerPoint, www.morningside.edu, selecting My Side, selecting Campus Offices, Career Services and Job Search, Resumes, and then pick the appropriate template. So if you are nursing, there's an RN template. If you're education, there's an education resume template, a graduate school resume template, and then the employment resume template is for anyone who doesn't fit into any of those other categories. So to get started, basic resume development, the goals today are to identify important information that should be on your resume, to figure a little bit out about the formatting and the organization, as well as teaching you how to describe your experiences in your own words at this point, and leave knowing what needs to be written, where it goes, and how to develop a rough draft. So what's next after this? You can attend an advanced resume workshop that's scheduled on campus, or you can schedule an appointment with Career Services using the crohnadvisingcenter.genbook.com link. My requirements when you book an appointment with me for a resume review is that you send me a copy of your draft before you come. All right, so let's get started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is what employers are looking for. And this is just paramount to anybody who's getting ready to job search or write a resume or anything like that. The first thing that employers like to see is related experience. So unfortunately, a lot of college students don't feel like they have enough related experience or any related experience, but you might really be surprised by what things count as related experience. So for example, classes that you've taken could count as related experience. So if you're an accounting major and you've taken financial accounting or income tax accounting, those would all count as related experience. So we would want to make sure that we document that. Any volunteer experience that you have done, either that's related to your field of study or related to your industry, would be counted as related experience. Internships, part-time employment, service learning, all of those are things that could count towards related experience. Second thing that employers look for are the skills that they're looking for or the relevance to the job. So once you're job searching, generally you start looking at lots of different job advertisements. Excuse me. And you're going to find, after looking at several of those, you start to see a variety of patterns. So employers are generally asking for some of the same kinds of things. So it's going to be important for you to, first of all, identify those patterns and then find ways to make connections between the experience that you have and the skills that you would need to be successful in that job. And sometimes those are easy parallels to make, sometimes they're not. And so it's going to be important for you to think about how is the things and experiences and work that you've done before related to what it is that you would like to do, okay? Third, employers look for a short, concise document that gets to the point. So new college graduates generally only have one page to get the information across. So you have to be a little bit discerning about what stays and what goes. Usually we don't include anything from high school on a resume. The exception to that is if you're a first-year student, then that information would be recent enough that we would allow you to go ahead and continue to incorporate that. And then finally, employers want something specific, and I can't even necessarily tell you what that is. So the reason for this bullet is that resumes are very subjective. So things that I like on a resume might not be something that a different employer likes on a resume, and vice versa. So some employers like color, some don't like color, some like you to go into a lot of detail about the positions that you had. Some like it to be very, very short and sweet with no descriptions. So really what you have to do is you have to shop that resume around and you have to get lots of feedback. At the end of the day, though, you're the one who has to feel good about the kind of document that you have. And so if someone gives you some feedback that you don't agree with or you don't feel really great about, it's not necessary for you to incorporate all the feedback that you get. Just make sure that at the end of the day, you feel really great about that document and it represents you well. One of the most important things that you do on your resume is your skills development. And that's really where we show the employer that you have what they need. But that takes you asking a lot of questions of yourself and doing a little bit of self-reflection. So some of those questions are going to be things like, what makes you unique? What skills are you better at than most people? And how can you relate that to your career choice? And you really want to think of that in perspective of where you are right now. So think about all of the students who go to Morningside College who are in the same major as you are. So you're taking a lot of the same classes, you're having a lot of the same experiences, you might even be on the same sports team or the same campus club or organization. How do you stand out from those students? How do you make yourself look different and unique? And then open it up. How do you do that with other students who go to schools throughout the state of Iowa or even nationwide? So how do you show that you're a unique individual and that you have the skills and abilities that they need? And that really takes sitting down and thinking about it. But we're going to do a little bit of brainstorming exercise right now to help you kind of figure out how those skills might be developed or how to talk about your developed skills. So there's generally two kinds of skills on your resume. One of those are technical skills. Technical skills are really just related to your education. So they're going to be the skills that you've learned from going to classes within your field of study, or the skills that you've learned by doing any sort of experiential experiences at those areas. Okay. Next, we're going to focus on your soft skills, which are personality characteristics or traits that you have that employers look for. So if you kind of put yourself in the shoes of an employer, per se, you might say, these are the kinds of characteristics that I would look for. Okay. So if we kind of brainstorm about what some of these skills might be, some things that potentially would be important for employers to know in certain majors. For example, if you are a psychology major, you might have knowledge of psychological theories or mental health illnesses that would be helpful for the position that you're applying for. Accounting students learn how to do accounts payable, accounts receivable, general reconciliation of accounts. Computer science majors learn computer programming, languages, coding operations, things like that. Biology students work with laboratory equipment, so they learn a lot about how that works. Education and nursing majors get to do a lot of hands-on interactive training that's going to be helpful for them. And software is always a big one. So software that you've learned in class, as well as software that you have proficiency with. And one of the benefits that your generation has is your proficiency with social media. So if that would be of value to an employer, we would want to make sure that we would go ahead and focus on that. These are the personal characteristics set forward by the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And they ask employers, what are the top skills that you look for in hiring candidates? So we have about 20 of them here that are listed. These aren't in any particular kind of order, so these are all fairly important. The key here is not to take all of these and shove them into every aspect of your resume, but really to think about what are the 2 to 3 skills that are on this list or other skills that you have that are not on this list that you can really provide evidence for. So you can show the employer that not only do I say that I have a strong work ethic, but I can show you that I have a strong work ethic. So for example, teamwork skills. It's very easy to show evidence that you can work well in a team if you've been on a sports team. If you have any sort of elected position, it's very easy to show that you have leadership skills. And it would be easy for you to show that you have things like communication skills, organizational skills, problem-solving skills, interpersonal skills, depending on the kind of job that you've had. So if you've had a job where you are doing a lot of customer service, you can show that you have those particular kinds of characteristics. It is also going to be helpful for you to think about what are the personal characteristics that are most important for someone who's going into this particular field of study. And think about what are the actions that you're going to be doing on a daily basis, what are the characteristics that are going to make those actions a little bit easier. So going into resume format, we have one side on all the information that you need to have, and then we have an optional area. So when talking about resumes, you have to have your contact information, your profile summary, your education, and either related work experience or work experience in general. There needs to be some sort of evidence that you have met expectations somewhere before, okay? On the optional side, you have things like campus involvement, leadership experience, community service, honors and awards, research experience for graduate school, professional memberships, certifications. Might also have, if you're interested in coaching, you might have coaching or athletic experience. And you can combine some of these. So for example, if you have maybe 1 or 2 things under campus involvement and 1 or 2 things under community service, you could have a section that's titled campus involvement and community service, or campus involvement and leadership experience. So you can find ways to group those together to save on space and to show that you have a really strong area that you can move forward for that heading. Starting with the profile statement, this is probably the most important part of your resume. This provides the focus. What kind of job are you looking for, and how can you explain to the employer that you would be a good candidate? So sort of questions that you wouldn't want to ask yourself: what are your greatest skills for a position like this, and how could you positively impact the organization? So when we start with that first sentence, we want to make sure that that sentence is very employer-centered versus you-centered. So an example of that would be, my profile might say, seeking an internship where I can gain experience to be able to advance in a company. That statement is very me-focused. And employers kind of get turned off a little bit when they can't see the value of what you're going to bring to the table. So a better way of phrasing that sentence is to start with what it is that you're looking for, why you would be a good candidate, and what the organization can expect to benefit from that. So for example, that might be saying something like, seeking a position as a bank teller where I can supplement my academic experience coupled with my high proficiency in math to provide excellent service to customers of the bank. So in that statement, you're providing all 3 of those areas so that the employer can immediately see the kind of benefit that you would be able to bring. Under that sentence, then, we want to have a series of bullets that sort of summarize what your experiences are in general. And as much as possible, we want those to align with the specific job that you're applying for. If you're writing the resume not for a specific job, but just to have it, then we're going to market that towards the industry that you are most interested in. So you really want to think about, what are your qualifications? What is important for the employer to know about you, and what makes you unique? And then start to sort of brainstorm and figure out, what are the 4 to 5 best statements that you could make to summarize your experience. You really want to spend a lot of time doing this. So the goal of this section is that the employer starts to look through it and they say to themselves, this person is really hitting all of the points that I look for in a candidate. I'm going to look at the rest of this with a lot more attention. And so a lot of times my recommendation is that you actually write this section last. Because if you fill out the rest of the resume and you look at the descriptions that you've written and the things that you focused on, it should provide you with what you could use as a summary at the top. The only caveat with this profile area is that if you have a bullet that indicates that you have a specific skill or skill set, we do need to see some evidence of that later on down the line. So for example, you can't say that you have strong leadership skills if you have never been a leader before, you've never had an elected position, you've never been a team captain, you've never been in charge of anything. So we have to make sure that there's evidence to show that you have the skills that you say that you have. The next section for everybody on the resume is going to be the education section. Okay, this is where you're really highlighting your formal education. And you can include other things in this area if you'd like to, like academic awards, your grade point average, or other campus activities. Or you could highlight those in another section. It just kind of depends on how much information you have and what other kind of information you have. So for example, if you have related experience, then we want to get to that section a little bit quicker. So I might recommend that you would have a campus involvement, campus and community involvement section, or an honors and award section for those kinds of things. If you don't have any experience in your field of study, then we may also want you to add a related courses section. Having related courses shows the employer that you have a knowledge background in the content area of what it is that they're doing. So it provides a little bit basis of knowledge that you can fall back on. And if you're following along on the template, you can see exactly how you set that up. So you start with Morningside College, Sioux City, Iowa. Then you tab over to the right-hand side of the page, put in the dates that you have been attending. If you're within a year of graduation, you can actually also put your expected graduation date. I'm going to follow that up with what major and minor you're pursuing, and you want to go ahead and spell these out: Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, and then any of that supplementary information that you feel like is important. Other kinds of things that have gone in here before have been things like study abroad can go in here, or any other supplementary programs like that. Okay, so the next section, if you have it, would be related experience. If you don't have related experience, then the next section we want to be your next strongest thing that you have going for you. So if you have a lot of campus involvement, that might be a campus involvement heading. If you have, you have a long work history that's dependable, it might be your other work history. The next section is going to be where you feel the most strongest. From a related experience perspective, there are several things that can be used in here. So if you've done projects and classes, for example, there's certain classes like advertising campaigns, public relations, sometimes the computer science courses, do things for outside organizations in class. That counts as related experience. So we would spell that out. Service learning, if it's related to your field of study, any internships that you've had, and any paid positions that would be related to your field. And here you can be a little bit broad. So for example, if you're interested, you're majoring in business, and you've worked at a bank as a teller, even if you're not interested in banking as your overall career, teller would be related to your field of study. For education and nursing majors, your related experience is really your practicums that you've done, your classroom experiences, or your clinical experiences. And so you just kind of replace those as stated on the template. Related experience, so you're going to talk a little bit about what you did there. Job duties that you had specifically, any software that you had worked with, operations, equipment, and we really want to focus on accomplishments if possible. So if you worked with a company on their social media, it can be helpful for us if we know what percentage of followers you increased for that organization. If there was a particular posting that got a lot of likes or retweets or something like that, anything where we can provide a number or we can show that there's been an accomplishment is going to be helpful. Sometimes at work, you get provided with additional responsibilities that you don't get a promotion for. And that would still be considered an accomplishment because you're able to do certain things that other people aren't able to do. Things like training or closing the register or things like that. The way that you set up your related professional experience or your work history is going to be the same. Okay, so you're going to have the name of the employer, the job title, the dates of employment. You can follow this along on the template. And then we're going to want to have a short description of your job duties. So if the position is related to your field of study, then we're going to talk exactly about what you did within your job. If your work history is not related to your field of study, then we really want to think outside of the box to figure out what are the skills that you gained from working that position? What are the characteristics that you honed there so that we can show the parallels between what you have done before and what you would like to do? It is fairly important for students to have a work history of some kind. So even if you've never worked like a formal job before, even if you've done babysitting or you've mowed lawns, it's important to show that you've had some sort of expectation from an employer at some point throughout your career. But we really want you to think outside the box for the descriptions that you're using for the jobs that are not related to your field of study. So for example, we think about cashiers. When talking about cashiers, a lot of students will say, I operated the cash register, I handled cash, I assisted customers, etc. That's all things that are universally recognizable to most people. Most people know that that is what cashiers do. What they might not know are kind of the other things that cashiers are responsible for, or the skills that you really get as a cashier. Cashiers frequently are the first line of connection between a customer and the store. They're greeting customers. They're the last person that the customer sees. So they have a really strong handle on customer service and making sure that that customer experience is everything that the store wants it to be. Cashiers frequently have to multitask, and a lot of times they have to handle sort of like escalated customer service issues. So if you're in a store and you're in a bad mood and then you have to wait in line a long time, even if your cashier is really friendly, you still might be a little growly and snarly, and the cashier's having to deal with that. So those are the things that we want to focus on more than handling that cash register. And same thing with the other things that are listed. Telemarketer, saying that you called people is really a fact that we already know. So let's talk about the underlying things of what you gain from that. Doing a lot of negotiating, doing a lot of handling of escalated customer service issues, perhaps providing complex information to people of all knowledge levels. So if you're one of those technical call centers, talking to people who have a lot of technical knowledge and talking with people who have little to no technical knowledge and being able to be successful. And landscaping. So people who work in landscaping or construction frequently work very long hours in all kinds of weather conditions, which means for the most part, they have a really strong work ethic. A lot of times for these kinds of positions, you're dropped off at a site and you're told what to do and then you're left alone. So you're working with little or no supervision, and you may also be responsible for project management in the sense of figuring out from start to finish how a project's going to be tackled. So these are the things that we want to focus on a lot more than just your specific job duties, particularly if they're not related to your field of study. Other sections that you might have on your resume would be honors, volunteer, achievements, campus and community activities. You could combine some of these. They could be separate. You can set this up any way that you'd like to. You're going to use these if they're pertinent to the position that you're applying for, because really they show leadership and community activities. So clubs that are related to your field of study, you're definitely going to use. If you're a chemistry major and you're in the chemistry club, that's absolutely something that you're going to put on your resume. If you're a member of like the Morningside Activity Council and you have room, then we would include that sort of thing as well, because it just shows that you've been working with people and you've been interacting with people from that perspective. So lots of flexibility on what you have here and what you don't have here, depending on how much space you have left. Things that we do not include: pictures, religious affiliation, political affiliation, marital relationship preference or status, personal issues and hobbies, and physical health information. So if you have work experience or volunteer experience through your local church, that doesn't mean that you can't include that, but it does mean that we are not going to list the denomination of the church. So Grace United Methodist Church just becomes Grace Church. So to indicate that you've had those experiences, but to not talk about your affiliation in general. So employers are not supposed to hire people based upon this information, so we don't provide any of that information. You can also have any miscellaneous sections on your resume. So the only caveat that we have is that the headings have to make sense for your experiences, and you should have at least 2 pieces of information or bullets under that heading. Otherwise, I want you to incorporate that information elsewhere. And kind of like a good holding place for a lot of this information is your education. So if you did something while you were here, we generally can put it under your education section. And where this comes into play is, for example, a lot of students feel like it's important that you've done volunteer work when you're applying for jobs. And that is true. That's something that employers look for. But if you don't have any volunteer experience, or your volunteer experience has been very minimal, then having a big heading that talks about your volunteer service and only having 1 bullet under there that talks about the one time that you volunteered the whole time that you've been a student actually calls attention to the fact that you don't have that much volunteering. And so in that case, it's better for you to just eliminate that heading and figure out a different way to incorporate that information, if indeed that is information that you feel like you should be using. You should always include references on a separate reference sheet. You're going to want to provide 3 to 5 professional references. Professional references are people who you work with or worked for. Okay, so it could be instructors, it could be coworkers, it could be supervisors, it could be club advisors, but you always want to contact your references ahead of time and make sure that they really want to be your reference, that they feel like they could provide specific enough information that would be helpful. With your resume, it's really important that you proofread it, you spell check, you show it to lots of people, and you begin to encourage criticism so that you can get a lot of aspects of things that perhaps you hadn't thought of. So sometimes the people who are in your life can remember things that they think would be pertinent even better than you can. So showing it to lots of people, determining what information you want to use and what information you don't want to use. And just remembering that a mistake on your resume means it's going in the garbage. So employers essentially expect that you can turn in a 1-page document that doesn't have any mistakes on it. And that is the end of the basic resume development session. So you have the template available to you from the website. That should be able to direct you on how to add all of this type of information. Again, the next step then would be for you to either attend an advanced resume session or to contact my office at crohnadvisingcenter.genbook.com and set up an appointment. Once you have a draft, then what I will do is I will work with you on elevating that document. So incorporating the action words that you might need, thinking about goals and accomplishments that we can highlight throughout the document, just making sure that it's ordered in an appropriate way. Thanks for listening.